Okay, good evening, everybody. We are here, and it's a pleasure to be here in front of you. We are here to talk about building a carbon-free future in 30 minutes. So it's something difficult to do, but we will try. We have here Anton Arts, who is managing partner of Set Ventures. Later, you may introduce further on your background. Francisco Benedito, co-founder, CEO at Climate Trade, and Manuel Fernández Ordóñez, who is a VP at Spanish Nuclear Society. So it's a very, very good, and this is Gonzalo Valencia, partner in Garrigues law firm, in M&A energy sector mainly. So, just to make the background of the conversation, carbon-free goals. Those have been led during years by environmental, global, and heating concerns. Now there's geopolitical concerns also in place to gain independency in the energy supply. 2030 Agenda, United Nations Climate Change Annual Conference, so many international efforts to achieve carbon neutral in 2030, or the sooner the better. So, many topics that we may discuss about: technology, electrification of the industry, artificial intelligence, digital technologies, and so on. So, if you like, we may start probably with the first question, probably to Anton. After you introduce further your background, how do you see the startups situation and R&D sector in Spain in relation to carbon-free goal?
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. I was excited to be in Madrid, to be among people with the same ideas, with the same beliefs, with the belief that the future can be carbon-free. And so I'm really glad for an opportunity to explain how we work on achieving that goal. So Set Ventures is a venture capital fund that invests in Europe's most prominent startups and scale-ups that use digital technologies to address climate change. So what we believe is that this is a huge wave of change, and that the future does not depend on just miracle technologies that only exist in the lab, but it really is about how to use the best business models and applications to scale what we have today. Because most of the solutions that we need for a carbon-free future are already here. And it's all about building an energy system that provides all of the participants the right incentives to contribute to that goal. And so, to me, it's not about technology, it's not about science and engineering, but it's predominantly about finding the right business models and applications that will drive that future. And what I am particularly excited about is to be here, in this high-energy event that brings together the best of the Spanish digital and tech ecosystem. And I think that if you consider that Spain is one of the most deeply renewable penetrated countries in the world, then the only thing that needs to happen here is to connect on one side the tech world with the energy world, and beautiful things will happen. And I'll talk about that a bit more, but I do want to leave some space for the other speakers.
Yeah, probably linked with incentives. In Francisco, Climate Trade is creates a marketplace that opens to the public the possibility to invest into carbon credits and market emission rights, carbon capture credits, guarantees of origin. So all those create certain incentives to the industry. Could you briefly explain to us how this market works and how this could be an incentive?
To get some context, 2017, there was initial stages of, again, the let's say, a new age for climate, again, in terms of decarbonization starting. So there was not a marketplace worldwide for carbon credits. There was not something where to bring those projects that Anton was mentioning. We need somewhere to find those projects that can make the difference, right? That can tackle climate change. So we thought, okay, we had to aggregate it like any other marketplace, put in a marketplace, demand, supply, and bring those projects. We linked it to the carbon markets because in 1987, the United Nations already created a method that it was working. It didn't work for a while, but now it looks like it's going to work. And we put there like our aim was to bring the largest database of carbon credit projects in the world. At the end, one carbon credit is a way to fund a project that doesn't have funding. So they issue carbon credits, and they can fund those decarbonization projects, no? To say somehow, no? Those green projects, to say somehow, to be understandable. So we grew that. We introduced blockchain technology to the equation, and we were awarded by the UN in 2018 as the best solution in the world for carbon markets. And from there, we've been very active on working on the new regulations on decarbonization. We've been part of the ICBCM, which is like the organization, the task force, that defines the high-quality carbon credits in the world. So we were 100 experts around the world defining what a carbon credit has to have in order to be reputable and the companies to be able to use it, because there's a lot of greenwashing here and reputation risks and fears from companies in order to buy carbon credits to offset because they think they doesn't generate impact and it's going to be affecting them reputationally, right? So we try to aggregate all that in the marketplace, and we grew it. Today is the largest database of carbon credits in the world. Biodiversity, we created the first biodiversity protocol in the world. And we presented in the COP in Egypt 2 years ago. And we have energy. We're talking here with a colleague in Endesa. So we have different players bringing energy certificates. And as well, now we are bringing future carbon credits, so carbon forward and off-take agreements for CDR, which is carbon removal projects as well, to the marketplace. All that linked to technology to bring it to the companies.
Very interesting. Now changing a little the subject, but very interesting in relation to climate change and green energy is the nuclear. Manuel Fernandez Ordóñez is probably one of the best experts in the matter. So how do you define, I mean, probably it's very controversial that the nuclear energy is a green energy. Now the regulations in the European Union have decided that it is green energy. It has several emissions. It has the waste. How do you briefly explain to all of us the situation in relation to the nuclear energy?
Yeah, let me, if you allow me first to make some introduction about energy transition, okay? Just to give some ideas. If you take a look at the share of fossil fuels in the primary energy production in the world, in the last 40 years, we have achieved nothing. Nothing at all. It's hard to listen, but it's the truth. Okay? In the 80s, we were using more than 80% of fossil fuels, and today we are using more than 80% of fossil fuels. So energy transitions are complex, are difficult. This is why we are here, and take time. Okay? It took coal almost 100 years to replace wood as the primary energy source in UK. And it took oil almost 100 years to replace coal as the primary energy source in the United States. Okay? But another piece of news, there is no such an energy transition. We have never made an energy transition in the history of humankind, ever. It's not an energy transition, it's an energy addition. Okay? The appearance of coal did not cause the disappearance of wood. Today, in Europe, we are using 3 times more wood than in the 19th century. Did you know that?
Biomass.
So there is no energy transition, there is an energy addition. So with this, I mean, is that we cannot pick alternatives, okay? We cannot say, this I don't like it, I don't want to use it. Either you use everything you got, or we will not make it, okay? So concerning your question now, nuclear. Is nuclear green? There is no such an energy as green. None of them, okay? There are more green energies than others, okay? So this was an interesting debate that took place at the European level like a couple of years ago. And finally, the European Commission decided to include nuclear, not as a green energy, as energy fulfilling the requirement to be in the taxonomy for sustainable development, which is not the same, okay? Because they also included gas, okay? So the point is that it was really a lot of controversy. It was like 5 years discussion, okay? Several group of experts involved. And finally, they decide that if you put the criteria to decide if an energy is green or not, if you put the criteria and you analyze, nuclear is green, for sure, okay?
Yeah, that's for sure a thing to debate in the future, and it will be in the debates in Spain for sure and many other countries. But going back to the carbon emissions, carbon free, in relation to the developments, I mean, we see many developments in technologies for renewable energy, software, digital solutions that make things goes very fast. Even we don't know if the electricity will be leading, the green hydrogen, the biogas. There's many things in the fact. How do you see from startup scale sector the development of technology? What do you see would be the next trend?
Yes, and I think in a good debate, there is a bit of a challenge. And I respectfully have to disagree with my colleague Gonzalo, because we see that the world is going renewable very, very quickly. Now, this does not mean that I have an opinion here on the greenness of nuclear. Because I do think that we need all the sources. But at the end of the day, energy is a market, and markets are defined by price. And what we've seen is the most spectacular cost reduction curve that you've ever seen around wind, around solar, around batteries. And to us, this is not a debate that's driven by ideology. It's not even driven by whether it's 2030 or 2040. It is driven by pure economics. And if you look at the speed at which we've been cost reducing and learning technologies, this is an unstoppable train. This is like being a supermarket salesperson who says, I don't believe in the internet in 2005. Well, you know what happened there. And it's important to realize that you can't put a wind turbine in your car. You need lots of other stuff. And we're in a transition because things aren't finished yet. And that's the magnitude of the opportunity that we see. That a lot of the technology, which is not just about generation, because in a way, generation is the easy part. The hard part is bringing renewable technology, renewable energy to you in a way that you can understand and that you can appreciate as a consumer and as a business. And so it means that topics like flexibility of the energy system, energy storage, needs to be converted, and the price signals in the energy system need to go to all the participants. It will mean that the moment your rooftop solar energy is free, you will be motivated to charge your electric vehicle. And you will be motivated to buy the vehicle in the first place because of the cheapness of the energy. I think at other times we will see that, for instance, nuclear power plants will still play a role in that system, but the balance is driven by markets that need digital technologies to operate. And so whether it is about how to construct the energy home of the future or how to give industrial companies the right tools to manage a portfolio of energy procurement rather than just a single energy contract, or whether it's about solving the challenge of managing tens of millions of individual power plants. You know, that's the future we have ahead of us, and that's the problems that all of us can solve, you know, with technology and with entrepreneurial energy and with some capital that we would be happy to contribute.
Yeah, I agree with you. Probably the market is led by the rules, by the politics, by the regulations. Nowadays, the regulations are more incentivizing the use of renewable energies, are punishing those companies that do not comply with the ESG concerns. the general opinion is probably against nuclear because of the ways, the history of the nuclear. So at the end, the concerns in relation to environmental issues have moved many, I mean, all the people, all the governments, regulations to rule in favor or against certain technologies. So at the end, this is something that is unstoppable. I don't know if it's a transition or it's not a transition, but everything is going forward for a change in the way the people use the energy and what are the sources of energy that are good to be used or are bad to be used. So this is taxonomy, this is... so at the end, my thing is, I don't know what is the technology that is going to rule out everything. I mean, things, that has some scale, multiplying scale. So at the end, now we have PV plants. PV plants now are in a bad situation, let's say, wind plants, but we have geothermal, which may be a trend. We have green hydrogen, which apparently is something that is going to bust everything, but it goes slowly. How do you see this coming up?
Well, everybody's looking for sort of the answer or the outcome that rules them all. And in fact, it will be driven by use cases and prices. And so we think that the basic technologies of wind, water, and solar will have the opportunity to drive an incredible decarbonization at the right price point. Of course, there's a number of matters that still need to be resolved. But for instance, the Netherlands, which you know is not the most solar-rich country in the world, has put up an enormous amount of PV capacity in the past few years, which has now led to the problem that we have a deeply congested grid. And people see that as a problem. And of course it is. But it actually illustrates that we've solved one problem and we now shift to the next, which again we will solve. So I don't have an opinion on, one over the other, but I do think it has to be dynamic. It has to be driven by consumer and customer behavior, and we have to basically put this back to people, because if I buy energy at a fixed cost per kilowatt hour, all year long, basically it's the energy company's problem what my profile looks like. If I start to take responsibility for managing either at my home or at a village or at an industrial site, it becomes sort of an energy management problem that we solve collectively. That's our view. So we're sort of not trying to take positions on the generation technology, but we're trying to create economies of scale on the entire energy system.
In relation to the energy credits market, so carbon emissions and so on, how do you see? I mean, how are those credits incentivizing the development of those technologies, the investment by industries in reducing their carbon emissions? How this goes with the public incentives, which probably has a limit.
Very easy. Like at the end, I agree with Anton in that the transformation is needed. It's a problem of management, but I agree with Manuel. It's on top of. It's an addition as well, because we have seen many things. The other day was one article about this in Stanford that says that we need $66 trillion in order to bring $66 trillion in order to bring 50% down emissions in the world. This is all about emissions. I mean, the world now is going to be ruled by emissions, right? So everything is about emissions. So you come down with 50% emissions, you need 66 trillion. But it looks like a lot, right? You need 6 years only to pay back that money with the new pricing, with we call it the evolution of the Moore's law, no? With the panels and all the technologies. We need 6 years to bring it down. So we need 50% down the emissions. And then, but we need addition, because then if we have a war like the one we have Russia, Ukraine, we saw Germany that had to put back the coal plants because they didn't have enough energy because they couldn't buy the natural gas, right? And I mean, we have situations, or we have California that they have the full grid. It was on renewables, and they had many big problems because of the heat and because of the management of the grid. So some things that we are not yet prepared to make the full shift, so we need to maintain the old style ways, transforming it. I mean, I'm seeing one of the companies we work with is one of the biggest utility plants in the UK. They were using coal, and when they brought out the new law, you cannot use coal anymore. They now burn biomass. So they burn wood again. Obviously, it's not wood that you cut to bring it there. It's like rests, and you make pellets, right? It's different. It's biomass that is renewable, right? But still is biomass, right? So why do you need certificates? Because imagine that you, in your home, you want renewable energy, but you don't know if the energy that is coming from your plug is green or not, right? You don't know it. So maybe you're a company and you have what is called 3 scopes. Scope 2 is like the source of emissions. Scope 2 is about green energy. Do you use your source of power? So if I want to neutralize my emissions of Scope 2, I have to buy green energy, or I have to buy certificates that other guy that is generating green energy in other place is selling to me because he doesn't need the green energy, right? It is because everything goes to a pool. You see it? So at the end, it's like those certificates are being purchased from our generation or generations in other parts of the country or states. Like in the US, you cannot sell from one state to the other. The regulation is not ready yet. But when it comes, you will be able to buy green energy whenever you want, and that incentivizes the new power plants like green or like solar, like wind or solar or any other type, right? So certificates help to incentivize the generation of new plants and new projects, right?
The poor people in the world, 4,000 million people, okay, 4 billion people, sorry. They are consuming only a little tiny bit of energy because they are poor. But they won't be poor forever, okay? They want to be rich. In order to get rich, they need to consume a lot of energy. So if we, the rich countries, if we don't manage to put on the table energy systems that are cheap, they are going to develop using fossil fuels. That's it. And this is why we are not reducing at all the CO2 emissions, because the poor people is escaping from poverty consuming fossil fuels, okay? For the moment. We need to develop technology. We need to put money into innovation, a lot of money and a lot of innovation, because otherwise we won't manage, okay? So if we waste our time discussing, if we shut down the 25% of electricity that nuclear power is producing in Europe, and you need to replace for this 25% with 25% of electricity from solar or for wind, we are wasting time.
I agree.
You put all the renewables you can, you leave all the nuclear you have, and then try to develop all the technologies you have, because otherwise we are not going to make it.
I think your point is best illustrated by the dominant influence of China in both PV technology, but also in driving electric vehicles that are so cheap that we need to put up tariffs in order to keep them out. And so I think China is an amazing example of how you can innovate your way out of this. And I think as Europe, we have to do the same thing. We have to stop buying tankers full of oil from places we don't necessarily like. And we need to replace it by innovation and technology that we generate in our own economy. And I think the beautiful thing about that technology is that it can scale cost-wise. If you look at the cost curves of no matter what, it looks like Moore's law. It looks like a continuous decline, and even the most optimistic forecasts about what wind, solar, and batteries will cost are still being exceeded. And even if there is a moment when people say, well, how is it going in this industry, it's usually just a plateau and then it keeps going down. And I think that is a phenomenal opportunity for us collectively. And that's why I agree with you, we should not focus the energy on closing things down, but on creating new things that drive this revolution.
Yeah, and besides, my point is that we need to get electricity and energy system cheap. And what we are doing in Europe is to make fossil fuel expensive by taxation. And it's not the same. It's not the same to make clean electricity cheap that make fossil fuel expensive, okay? And this is what we are doing in Europe, and we are totally wrong.
Yeah, yes, we are getting to the end, but yeah, one last question. We are talking about money. How does all this may cost? If we inject whatever trillion, we may reduce 50%. It's not all about money. It's about time. So we need time to do this transition, let's say. We do not have human resources are difficult to find in order to develop all technologies at the same time in many places around. We don't have financing in place. We do not have many things that needs to be put forward. So, I mean, how do you see this bottleneck probably, which is impeding the development of those technologies being faster?
Yeah, if you make the numbers, it's for Europe, it's easy. We are consuming now 16,000 terawatt-hours of fossil fuels. Until 2050, we have more or less 10,000 days. Okay, so the math is really easy. It's 1.6 terawatt-hour per day of fossil fuels that you have to get rid of. So this is a nuclear power plant every 6 days. So this is the challenge we are facing, okay? If you put the figures. This is 1 million solar panels per day. And if you don't install 1 million today, you have to install 2 million tomorrow. And 3 million the day after tomorrow. So I love politicians, they do Excel files and everything, fit. But then reality is reality. And you cannot put reality on an Excel file because then happens what it happens, okay?
The other view on this is the power of exponential growth and technology. And we've seen this in the internet. If you imagine how fast we've built that infrastructure, we've seen this in software. And so it does mean we have to gather collective energy, to unleash our collective energy. It cannot be done top-down. You're right, you cannot build power plants at that pace. But my prediction is we will be able to build distributed renewable energy systems at that pace if we get the system rolling.
I agree. I mean, for me, it's like basically efficiency in money allocation from governments. US is started later than us and is catching us up like very fast because they make more efficient allocation of the funds. Second thing, we need to support those projects that bring those technologies and we can scale them and decarbonize the planet.
Okay. Well, there's no more time. Apologies for that. We will be speaking for very long. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for explaining that well. And see you soon.